What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Truth Podcast. I'm your host, Hany Rambod, and I have a very special guest with me today, Dave Palumbo. Dave is the CEO of Species Nutrition, as well as the owner of RX Muscle. Dave, welcome aboard and welcome to the Truth Podcast. It's crazy because we just did our first RX Muscle interview less than 2 weeks ago, and now I have you on mine. So I really appreciate the time and the reciprocation.
It's nice to go on the other side of the microphone. And I want to just clarify, my wife is actually technically the CEO of Species Nutrition. She does everything. I'm just the ugly front guy. I create the products and market them, but she's the brains behind the operation. I want to give.
Well, then definitely I'm going to be buying some stock now in that Species Nutrition. I know we worked together back in MD days, and a lot of people, it's been a while since the magazines have been kind of on the forefront of everybody's kind of desks. That used to be a big deal. Flex Magazine, Muscular Development. You and I both worked for Steve Bleckman back in the day. I wanted to start off with a little bit of our history. I mean, you were there before I got there. I came in 2003. When did you come on?
I started right when he launched when he got rid of the natural muscular development, and I think it was 2001. He said, I want to relaunch the magazine. I want you to have a column. I want to call it the Anabolic Freak and, answer all the questions. There's no holds barred. I'm like, all right, great. I love to do that. That would be phenomenal, And I think at the time, and I think you might be the only other guy, but I think that we might've been, and I could be wrong. I don't know if you did this too, but we might've been the only two guys to actually write our own columns.
Yeah. Well, I did. I basically had Ron transcribe for me. So I wouldn't have to sit in front of the computer. And then what he would do is he would just I would do the whole column with him, and then he would transcribe it, send it to me. I would approve it to make sure that it was exactly what I said. He didn't get anything wrong, because once in a while that would happen, Yeah. And then because I would be traveling so much, I would get on the phone with him 6-9 time zones away. And then Ron was so, gracious to be able to put it all on Word doc, send it over to me, and I'd be like, no, I didn't say this, let me change this. And I would make whatever changes, and then we would do it. But he would basically transcribe it for me.
You were just lazy, that's all. But you wrote the article. The funny thing is, a lot of the guys, and people don't even realize that, they never wrote their articles. Ron would call them up and just ask them a couple questions, get some information, then he would go and write the articles, because a lot of these guys either were too lazy, or they didn't have the time, or they couldn't write, and Ron was cranking out. I mean, the guy was, I don't know how he wrote so many articles every month, to be honest with you, because I know just doing my article used to take a lot out of me, because to come up with original content and everything like that.
Yeah, it took a long time. I mean, when I used to do the super features with Flex Magazine and Alan Donnelly, we would be up till 3 or 4 in the morning, and I would do these 12 or 13 page super features, because I would have all the nutrition, then I would have the training components. And basically I would build out a whole ebook all in the column, and basically focus on making sure that the person knew exactly how to go from step 1 to step 2. And it would take sometimes 2 or 3 weeks to build it out properly.
Did they pay you well for that?
There was a lot of things that I did. I would either get a check, or I would get something like in a barter system at the time when I first started eVision. And I would turn around and I would say, hey, look, can you just give me a page or two ad space, which was very, very expensive at the time. I mean,
yeah, $7,000, right? Something like that.
Mm-hmm, yep. I mean, I think with the discount. Yep. And then if you really, put the screws on them, maybe 5,000 or 6,000. But yeah, on average.
So that's $10,000. You got 2 pages. That's $10,000 an article.
Yeah. I would get anywhere from one. Yeah. Yeah. So whenever I would do something along those lines, it wasn't on, I did muscular development for 10 years straight. So that was over 120 months straight of the Pro Creator column.
It's a lot. Yeah. I did 01 to, I guess, 09 when I left. So that was, that's 8 years, it's a lot of columns,
Yeah. And then you were the enemy.
And then I was the enemy, right?
Yes. You were the enemy.
It's amazing how you go from the good guy to the enemy so quickly.
Oh man. But yeah, so anyways, that's a lot of the history from back in the day when we did these articles, and it was a really good time. And now obviously everything's switched over to the internet and everything else. And what I wanted to do is basically, the big news right now is this whole thing with the thyroid. Can you explain to the listeners, everyone online right now, you obviously have a very immensely popular channel. You have, lots of people that listen to you, and you mentioned some things going on with your health. Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Yeah, it's interesting because, my mom passed away from cancer when I was 14. Her father, my grandfather, died of cancer, and my grandmother died much later, but also of cancer.
All the same kinds, Dave? Were those the same kinds?
Yeah, all different types. My grandfather was like liver. My mother was pancreatic. My grandmother had lung cancer. Her sister, my mother's sister, had breast cancer. So, I mean, it was like a bunch of different cancers, but that's like one side. And then my Italian side of my heritage, they live forever, pretty much. They just get a lot of little, annoying type of things that happen their whole life. But so I always said, look, I will not pigeonhole myself into any kind of a job that I don't enjoy, which I'm going to have emotional pain or anguish because I'm not really liking what I'm doing, because I'm going to get cancer and die. That was my thought process. And that was one of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons why I left medical school, because I didn't enjoy it anymore in my third year. I didn't like working in a hospital. I said, this is not something I want to do. I don't care. I'm not dying young of cancer. That's not going to happen to me. I'm not allowing it into my wheelhouse. I'm going to eat right. I'm going to train. I'm going to work out. I'm going to be healthy. And that's it. So I didn't think I'd ever even be confronting that possibility. Now, I don't know if I have it or not. So I went for a routine scan of my heart because I have an enlarged aorta. It's probably something that I can blame on my family, right? Genetics. And so they check it every year. And then on one of the scans, they found, oh, by the way, you have a nodule on your thyroid, even though your aorta is actually perfect. So I'm like, great. All right. But, now a lot of people would never even follow up with it. They didn't recommend any follow-up. It just happened to be on the report that I always read my own reports. I'm sure you do the same thing, because I don't trust these people miss things and stuff like that. And they don't tell you, they think so I'm like, you know what? I better get this thing scanned just to rule it out. I know like people get thyroid nodules all the time, and that's just the way it is. I'm like, all right, whatever. So I go in there and I get scanned. The woman scanning me, she's like, oh, don't worry. Don't even, I see these all the time. It's probably nothing. This is what the technician is telling me.
Right.
So at the end of the scan, which took about 5 minutes, I said to her, so what do you think? Because I know they can't tell you, but I could always read their face. And she's like, oh, I really can't tell you, your doc. I'm like, I must be dying. Because usually they'll be like, oh, don't worry about it. You'll the report. I get back to my house. It takes 20 minutes to drive back to my house. The report is done already. I get a notification on my phone. Check your My Chart, the new test result. I'm like, that was the fastest radiologist report ever. So, and it says, they rate these nodules on your thyroid from 1 to 5, 5 being, the highly suspicious ones where they think you should get them checked out. So I was a 5. Rated a 5, which said highly suspicious. That the thing, I guess, was a little longer than it was wide, and it had some calcifications on it. It was only 10 millimeters. It was like 1 centimeter. It wasn't big, but
right.
It had some, some suspicious, features to it. So I said, all right, you know what? And they recommend a needle biopsy, so I'm like, all right, well, let me go call, and I got to call an endocrinologist now, right? I can't get an appointment with an endocrinologist. They want to see me in 3 months. That's the nearest appointment.
Right. So basically you're going through it. Your mindset is like, I need to get this thing figured out right now. Right now, I need to figure this out because days and weeks matter right now. And they're like, hey, we have something in for you. And is that just because of your health plan, or is it because of the specific doctor you're trying to see?
No, it's just because there's no endocrinologist down here. They want you to see a physician's assistant. I'm like, I'm not seeing a physician's assistant for this. This could be thyroid cancer for all I know, right. Which is obviously the most curable form, of cancer. If you're going to get one, that's not a bad one to get. They take your thyroid out and they give you a little radioactive iodine, and then you're done. But the point is that at this point, I don't know what it is. So I want to go see someone. So no one can see. One guy wants to do telemedicine. He wants to do it like a Zoom call with me. I'm like, what is this? He's not going to even feel my neck. I mean, what's going on here?
Right. Do you feel anything? Did you have any symptoms at all, Dave?
No.
Nothing.
I feel absolutely fine. As a matter of fact, I feel great. So I'm thinking, maybe I caught it really, really, really early. Who knows?
Yeah.
So I remember now my very good friend I grew up with, my whole life I spent with this kid, one of my, in my inner circle of friends, he's the kind of guy you can pick up the phone with. And even though you haven't talked in 10 years, he's like your best friend still. So I call him up. I'm like, Lenny, I said, he's an endocrinologist, ironically enough, in Miami. I tell him the whole story. I send him the report. I get the report for him. I get the actual disc. He's like, let me see the disc. Cause sometimes, they don't read these things right. He's like, well, it looks a little suspicious. I think you should definitely do a needle biopsy. I said, I don't have anyone who can do it here. They want to wait 3 months. He's like, come into my office. I actually do them myself. He's a genius, this kid. Okay. So I'm going tomorrow. He's going to actually needle biopsy himself in his office, you know, because they have the x-ray, they have the radiologist text there. He's going to do the actual stick himself. Hopefully they'll let me film it. So people like to follow this crap. I don't know why, but they do. And I'll find out at least if there's any kind of malignancy there or anything like that. And then I can make a decision what I want to do. Now, a lot of people have reached out to me, alternative modalities and all these different, you know, treatments that people have done. And, you know, from pancreatin, which is, you know, like a pancreatic enzymes, digestive enzymes, to ozone treatment, which I actually have an ozone machine in my house. I used to do ozone treatments all the time on myself, just for, you know, for shits and giggles, to stem cells, to what was the other one? Drinking bicarbonate, sodium bicarbonate in the morning and at night to alkalinize your system, because obviously cancer doesn't grow in an alkaline environment. And I know all these things intuitively, but it's nice that a lot of people have really reached out to me and, you know, said, hey, look, I have someone who's did this and this person knows that. And so it was kind of cool. I just actually today I talked to this guy, Anthony DiPasquale. You might, the name may ring a bell. I don't know if you know who he is, but he is his uncle was Mauro DiPasquale. Remember the doctor used to write for Muscle Mag?
Yes, that's how I remember the last name. It sounded familiar.
Anabolic doc. So he's like our age now. He's like in his 50s, and he's a big alternative medicine guy. This guy. So we were talking. I'm gonna actually probably get him on my TV show just to talk about some of these, you know, modalities that he uses. He's really big into this pancreatin enzyme, along with a lot of vitamin C. They found that a lot of cysts, if you have cysts in your body, it shrinks them up really well. And if you have calcified cyst, if you add vitamin K2 onto that, it will decalcify these cysts. So it's, you know, it's some interesting, you know, like naturopathic, you know, routes. Obviously, if I have cancer, more than likely I'll get it removed and then do the other stuff afterwards. But I like having a full spectrum of data at my disposal so I can make a decision once I know what it is.
And that's exactly the way somebody who's pragmatic, their approach is, because you want to be able to cover all of your bases. You want to create some, you know, the alkaline environment. You want to make sure you minimize any kinds of possibilities of it coming back afterwards, anything like that. So that's really, really important. I think, so you haven't had any issues with like weight loss or any of those things that kind of fall in that thyroid range?
No, it's funny. My thyroid, I haven't had them like tested within the last 6 months, but before that they were it's funny. You know, my whole bodybuilding career, I never had a single blood test that was normal, because I always had high liver enzymes or high, you know, low HDLs or all the steroid induced, you know, side effects you see. I had every one of them. Now that I don't, you know, I work out, but I don't work out like maniac anymore. I've dropped my body weight down. You know, I'm 185 pounds. You know, I had my blood.
How tall are you, Dave?
5'9.5", around there, 5'9".
Yeah, but you got like a gigantic shoes too.
I wear size 15. I should have been 6'8" with the size shoe I wear. Exactly.
So what do you think the cause of that was? Do you think it was because of the growth, or do you think it was something that has to do with something else?
I think your feet can grow from GH, by the way. But I think we're talking like a half a size, you know, the most. I was a 12. I was a 13 as a kid. You know, that was when I was 18, I had 13. 13 and 13 and a half, around there. And actually, at one point in my bodybuilding career, when I hit 300, I went from a 13 and a half to a 16. Like, it was like almost like in a month. What happened, I think, is my arch collapsed in my foot, because I think it just stretched out because I was so heavy that because when I lost the weight, I actually went from a 16 down to now I'm a 15. So I think, and I have very, very flat feet now. I mean, and like I said, I think from being that heavy, I stretched out. I probably grew one size, maybe a foot size, I think. And that's what when I talk to guys with GH usage, usually it's usually about 1 foot size they usually grow. But just being big will spread your foot a lot too, just because you're carrying around enormous amounts of weight on your body. But absolutely. All the men in my family have big feet, big hands. So.
That's it. Well, I think the biggest thing that comes to mind too was when I heard about this news was that when they did Dallas's autopsy, you know, he had obviously some, you know, a tumor as well.
I forgot that. You're right. You're 100% right.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking to myself, you know, I know you didn't, for those of you that don't know Dave that far back who follow me, Dave was probably, I mean, how many times did you try to get your pro card? How many times did you compete at like a national level show?
Too many times to remember. That's how many times. Yeah, I had 2 second places, 2 third places, I think, and a couple 4th, 5th places too.
Yeah, and they're all in the super heavies. So you know, Dave was a very, very big guy, and obviously, I think the last show you did was in the early 2000s.
04, yeah.
Yeah, it was in 04, and one of the things was that Dave would come in wickedly shredded, and I do want to talk to you about your diet concepts because that's something that I want to definitely talk about. But the thing is about Dave is if you go back and you look up Dave's photos, he was always in condition. You were always ripped. And one of the things that comes to mind is like when I heard about that, and again, you know, I had the, you know, ability and I had the, to work with Dallas for a prep. You know, we worked together for a couple of years for off season, and I did his pro debut. Pro debut, which was the cow. And that was the show we worked together. And when he passed, all the autopsy stuff came back, and it was kind of, it was, you know, one of the things that was like very triggering was that he had the issue with the thyroid. And I was just thinking to myself, you know, nowadays there's a lot of the guys are into these peptides, which, you know, I'm just very, very against a lot of these things because they just haven't been proven. They haven't been tested, you know. If you're going to go take testosterone, you're going to take nandrolone. These things have been around for 60, 70 years. You're taking a lot of these things. But at the end of the day, and a lot of them can be prescribed by a doctor and safely be used for hormone replacement therapy. But when it comes to these peptides that are basically on some website that's for research only, there's a lot more that I think has been happening. And I haven't had a chance to really talk about this, but because you are a very good sounding board in regards to this conversation, do you feel that this situation with you and indiscriminate cells, how, whether it's, you know, growth hormone or some of these other peptides, especially like, let's start with growth hormone because it's been around for a long time. Do you feel that would, you know, my philosophy is you're going to get indiscriminate growth of cells. Okay. You could even wake up dormant cells with growth hormone. And I was in the same situation as you. My mom got cancer when she was 14. And it was one of the reasons why I competed as a natural bodybuilder. Because of that, she got a really acute myeloid leukemia, and she was able to get a bone marrow transplant at Stanford University, and she lived. And it's just so it reminds me of the situation you were in, but unfortunately, it sounded like your mother passed.
Yeah, pancreatic cancer.
Yeah, pancreatic cancer. And at that point, you know, we're at that 14-year-old age. It's a very, very fragile age.
Yeah, sure.
So when we're looking at that, did you think ever to yourself, like any of these things that you were taking, whether you're competing or whatnot, could possibly affect that situation? Because again, that's one of the reasons why I didn't go down that road for me personally, because I felt like I didn't have the genetics to be somebody, the next Dorian Yates or any of those other guys. So for me, it was one of those things that, hey, look, I'm going to go ahead and stick to these natty shows, and I'm going to just take it as far as I can. But do you feel like, do you contribute any of these things that are going on with some of these people with some of that, or is that something that has basically you had a chance to think about that?
Yeah, I didn't really ever. I kind of left the game before all those peptides came on board, so I never really used any of those. So, and I would think that I would say yes, maybe if this had happened while I was using them, but I mean, I haven't even used hormone replacement for like over 5 years, almost 6 years now. So it's kind of weird that these things.
You're not even taking like a shot of test a week or anything like that, like the guys that are in their 50s.
Yeah, it's funny because my testosterone came back. I have like a 500 testosterone, so I'm like pretty good natural. So
nice.
So you know what? I feel good. I think you see, because if I start taking like HRT, then I'm going to start like wanting to gain muscle and stuff. I don't want to get any bigger. I'm like, my blood pressure's good. I'm like, I feel really healthy at this level. I have good energy. That's why it's kind of weird that I had, all these weird things happen. I think sometimes your genetics, your genetic time clocks go off in your body, and you get old and things don't regenerate and fix themselves as well. And who knows, I always had like little like weird cysts and stuff like that I got on my body, so it doesn't surprise me now, the fact that Dallas had that thyroid issue. I don't know what could have caused that, but I'll tell you one thing. If you watch the interview I did with Bostin Lloyd recently, he took some kind of peptide that was supposed to, incinerate fat cells, and it might have destroyed his kidneys. He's in like, he's got some pretty bad creatinine levels over 6.
So isn't he like stage 3 or 4, like renal failure?
I mean, a creatinine of 6.5 is not good,
No.
Yeah, so, I mean, you know that. I don't have to tell you. So, I mean, and he attributes it to that peptide, and there is some data that shows that the peptide can be, kidney toxic. So you're right. These indiscriminately pumping yourself full, these random peptides that are sold, the promise is everything from regenerating, cartilage and this and that, and fixing your immune system. You're a retard if you use it, because there's no one knows the safety data of these things. You don't even know if what you're taking is really that peptide, so right. It's scary, sometimes, with
why would I did happen to watch that actually. And I saw that interview you did. So it's one of those things where I'll have my team link that interview, your interview on this, so that if you guys want to see it, because the point of this is that a lot of people sell a lot of bill of goods, and I don't understand why someone, whether it's Bostin or anybody, would go and take these research chemicals and inject them into their bodies. I mean, it's one of those things. I know it's this false sense of like, I'm, so-and-so in the gym does this, or somebody on the Olympia stage does this. They don't, guys. I hate to tell you this, because Dave and I know we've worked with top athletes in the world. This is the guy trying to sell you something, whether it's a website, whether it's someone on Instagram, because now I even see things pop up on Instagram where they're trying to even sell research chemicals online now before they get shut down, because these guys are just fly-by-night companies that are trying to sell these things. And I saw the interview, and he said something that he was injecting it in his lower back and next to his kidneys. And it's known to be toxic, but it might incinerate fat cells. And again, it's just, and now his creatinine is 6. And just for those that don't have an idea of where creatinine levels should hover, for a bodybuilder, 1.0 to maybe 1.3. If you train really hard, it could be a little bit higher than that. But that's where your creatinine levels, and then if you're a little higher than that, maybe you had a hard workout, or maybe you're taking creatine monohydrate and can show us a slightly elevated number. But again, that's like 1.5, 1.6, nothing much higher than that. And that's with a hard workout with creatine being taken. When you start going into 2, 3, 4, and what you said was he was at 6.what? 6.5. That is like, hey, well, you better sign up for, dialysis soon and all of that. So that's a shame. And I guess my whole thing is, I know you did a couple interviews. Did he regret it, or was it just like, hey, I did it and I thought I got the best out of it? Because now I'm just curious because you brought it up.
I'm sure he can't be happy about it, but it seems like, he's got this attitude like, well, I'll just go on nightly dialysis and I'll just compete like Don Long did. Like sometimes he doesn't, sometimes he doesn't make sense to me, but hopefully, look, I pray, I say a prayer from every night, because I really love the kid, and he's a really good guy.
Yeah, he's a Bay Area kid. He used to work up at one of the stores up here in Northern California.
Oh, that's right. He's from, up your woods. You must probably knew his dad, John Lloyd, right?
No, I didn't know him. I knew him because he worked at Ken Talley's store, and I would see him in there. Yeah. I would see him.
Really good kid, but he just sometimes doesn't make the best decisions. He likes to use himself he likes to do the Dan Duchesne route, test out all these crazy compounds. The truth is, and you and I both know this, that anabolic steroids and GH and IGF-1 to some degree, you're not going to get any more significant growth from taking 400 different peptides with it. These peptides don't really work. The reason why people use them, and you and I know this, is because they're readily accessible. You can buy them. So people think, oh, well, I can't get GH and I really can't afford it. So I'm just going to buy all these GH releasing peptides and I'll take 900 of them because they're cheaper and I'll just get the same result. Well, first of all, you don't get the same result. Secondly, when you take that high a dosage, you're stimulating your pituitary gland. But when you take them in such high dosages, you're actually stimulating other parts of your pituitary gland too. That's why a lot of these guys, I don't know if you noticed this, sometimes these guys will take so much excessive amounts of peptides that they actually have high prolactin levels. They're like, I don't know how I have high prolactin. I'm not taking any DEC or a Trembolone. Well, you know what? You're overstimulating your pituitary gland, and it's releasing, prolactin. So there's other, you can't just take ridiculous amounts of this stuff and then expect no ramifications. These are active hormones that are doing things in the body, and they're binding to receptors, and we don't know what receptors they bind to in excessive amounts the way people are doing them. And the truth is, you're not going to get any more fat burning or any more muscle building than you would get from taking a steroid or GH cycle. So, or
just how about just dieting?
Right. But I'm just saying, my point is, people think that, okay, I got the GH and the anabolics in there. Now I'm going to take it to the next level and be Mr. Olympia because I got 60 peptides at my disposal that I can inject all day long. I think people just like the injections. And so in their mind, they rationalize, all right, now I got the edge on everyone else because I got 16 peptides I'm also taking with GH and anabolics. Dorian didn't have these. Ronnie didn't have these. I should be able to go beyond them. No, you're not going to go beyond them. These things don't do anything. Okay. They're not that effective. If they were effective, people would use them and they wouldn't use the steroids and GH. They don't work the way you think they work. So people do stupid shit all the time though, and so it doesn't.
So you think it's accessibility more than anything? It's accessibility.
Yeah. I do think though, getting back to the thyroid thing, I think that, I think my mom had some kind of thyroid issue. I can't remember. I think it was before I was born. I think I remember my dad telling me or something like that. I didn't get the whole story. Obviously, no one's alive now to verify this stuff. But I think a lot of like thyroid nodules are very genetic. And my aunt has like 40 nodules on a thyroid, but they're all benign. Now, like I said, I don't know if mine is or not, but anything can go wrong at any time. And that's the key is, and I always wondered why. Maybe you could relate to this. We get our heart screened. Okay. We get colonoscopies when we hit 50. Why don't they screen, in other countries, they screen your thyroid. It's a simple ultrasound of your thyroid because nodules are very, very common from what I understand now, the reading I've been doing. And there's a lot of people that get more people than because I have people reach out to me, have had thyroid cancer and had to have their thyroid removed. And a lot of times, unfortunately, they have people wait until they actually have to feel them in their neck sticking out of there. And that's usually when they could have spread. Or I can't understand why they wouldn't do a routine, thyroid scan in this country. Probably because they don't want to spend the money, the insurance companies don't want to cover it. But it really, when you hit 40, you should probably every 5 years go for a thyroid scan. I have to add that now to my list of things I tell people to do. Get your echocardiogram, get your cardiac CT scan so you see if your heart's good. Get your colonoscopy, when if you have colon cancer in your family, get it younger. And now get a thyroid scan because obviously, look at Dallas. There's things that can happen that you don't know. And so it's a simple, the ultrasound took literally 5 minutes for them to do. I wish I would have done it, even earlier.
Yeah, no, I think you make a really good point. And I think speaking from personal experience, I'm 46, so I'm a little bit younger than you, but I got my colonoscopy right when I was like 42, 43, because what I did was, again, knowing my personal history, I had a lot of problem with gluten and with a lot of things that I didn't realize was causing my stomach problems. So, and I knew that the more irritation, there's more likely I'm going to have polyps, and those polyps can turn into cancer. So what I did was I went in early. And they said, yeah, we took out some polyps. They're yeah. And they said, good call. And I said, well, because I had so many stomach problems, I've been gluten-free for over 10 years now. But before that, I would eat a bagel and I'm like, what's going on? And then even when I went and did the basic celiac test, they said it was inconclusive. It was negative. And then Dr. Stanford just said, just cut it out and see if you feel better. And I remember I was getting somebody ready for the New York Pro. And I was like out there and I had a turkey sandwich and my stomach was just tore up. And I'm like, it must have been the lettuce, or it must have been something that's contaminated. It was the bread, and there was a delayed onset reaction. And now, because I haven't had it for so long, if I did have it, it would be immediate. But because it's just like lactose, your body gets used to taking it in, and then it'll just flare up, and then you can have irritation later. Or if you haven't had it for a long time, you can have instant irritation. But this thing with your thyroid, again, we know that didn't make Dallas, God rest his soul, pass away wasn't that, but when they did the autopsy, it was interesting that they found that.
Yeah.
Because it, I mean, obviously it had to do with more of his heart, I believe.
Now, if he had some cells growing there, like now getting back to what you said, and he was on a lot of GH, it certainly could have made it grow.
Right.
I mean, luckily I have a thyroid nodule, but I haven't been taking GH in, so many 5 years, so 6-10 years maybe. So it didn't have that effect on me, but like, absolutely. If you do have some dormant, kind of cancer cells, it will definitely make it grow faster. Going back to the colonoscopy, it's funny because, I didn't have one till just this past year. Probably should have gotten one at 50, and I kept delaying it, but I kept saying, I sell, one of my most popular products from Species Nutrition is Fiberlize, and everyone.
My wife sells your product.
Oh, she does. Yeah.
In her store. In her store. Yeah.
What's the store?
Nutrition Palace in Canada.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, it's a very good selling product. It works really well. We use a very high swell rate psyllium, and people love it. It's got like a cult following. People just, especially to eat a lot of meals, it really moves everything through. So I've always been like,
or especially when you're keto, we'll get into that.
You're not eating carbs, right?
Exactly.
So I tell everyone, Mike, you take Fiberlize every day, twice a day. You're not getting colon cancer, okay? Because it's keeping stuff moving through the tract. It's the fiber itself is the soluble fiber is a food source for the good bacteria in your colon. So it's feeding those probiotic bacteria in there. And I know that, and you're not going to ever get hemorrhoids because when you go to the bathroom, it just kind of slides out of you. There's no straining involved. That's the key. And it keeps the musculature of the colon healthy, and it alkalinizes the colon, which is going to keep the immune system working well. So I'm this advocate of doing this over and over and over for years now, since I started producing it back in, 2009 or something like that. And so now I got to go for a colonoscopy now. Now, if I come back with polyps, and
you haven't done it yet? You haven't done a colonoscopy yet?
No, I did. So I just did it this past year. So I'm going into the colonoscopy. I feel comfortable because I know that I take really good care of myself, eat right, and I do this, and I religiously do fiber in my Fiberlize product. And so I go in there and I'm like waiting for the results to come in. The doctor calls me up. He's like, I had to call you. I'm like, oh no, shit, I have colon cancer. He said, I had to call you because he goes, in the 20 years I've been doing this, he goes, I've never seen such a clean colon in my entire life. He says,
there you go. You
look like a newborn baby. And so I was like gleaming, with like, oh my God. All right. And he's like, he goes, do you do anything? And I told him what I did. And I sent them actually a bottle of this. He's like, that sounds great. And I sent them a bottle of stuff. So it was pretty funny, but you got to take care of yourself. And that's the key. I've also read some stuff. Someone actually reached out to me about the thyroid that sometimes a lot of nodules develop if you don't take in enough iodine, a biologically available iodine. So I know I eat a lot of iodized salt because I'm a saltaholic. I thought that was good enough, but evidently the iodized salt doesn't get absorbed as well as some of the more like Lugol solution of iodine.
Yeah, I have heard that as well. Again, it's one of those things where it's just like the alkalinity thing. It's like, how much would you have gotten it if you were more alkaline, or you can't? Because I mean, I remember some of the other athletes. Centopani was really big on the alkaline water and everything else.
Yeah, I think I got him into that. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that was the thing. But one of the things is, iodine and bioavailable salts are really, really one of those things that I've heard the same thing. But going back to the blood work, just so people know out there, because I think we should touch on it, because I haven't gone into my program at all, and I think this is a good segue into it. When I have my athletes go through and do blood work, we want to do a full chem panel, right? So we want to do a full chem panel. We go through a full lipid panel. I go through like a homocysteine as well as a C-reactive protein panel, which is going to also show for inflammatory markers. So what we're doing is we're trying to make sure that, your chem panel is going to check everything from your blood sugar to make sure you're not pre-diabetic or diabetic. You're going to make sure your creatinine and everything is all on point. And again, we're not doctors, guys, but we're just trying to help you work with your doctor to make sure that as you're putting, everyone knows out there that I'm a big car guy, I'm a big track guy. You're putting miles on the car. You want to make sure that you're tuning it up and you're making sure that you're not going to blow a head gasket, especially if you're running it hard and you're and rough in terms of in the gym, or if you're actually starting to do hormone replacement therapy. You want to check your liver is a part of that chem panel, and then your CBC to make sure your comprehensive blood to make sure that everything is good, and then the lipids, because like you said, HDL is a factor, because if you run anti-estrogens, then your high density lipids tend to go down. So those are things that exercise helps that. There's some evidence of niacin helping that. There's also some evidence of just cardio also helping that as well, and some omegas. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I found with relation to the HDLs, ironically enough, that and I've had a few cardiologists confirm this who are like, more advanced thinkers. If your LDLs, which are your bad cholesterol carriers, okay, those are I call them the litter bugs of the body. They kind of travel around the body in the bloodstream. They dump cholesterol like a litter bug would throw, litter out of a car window. And then the HDLs are kind of like the vacuum cleaners that kind of go around and kind of suck them up, right? If you don't have a lot of litter bugs, throwing crap all over your body, it doesn't matter if your HDLs are very low, because there's no risk of you having deposits. And that's, kind of like been my whole bodybuilding career. When I would go for blood work, my HDLs were always low because I was on, cycles of drugs, and we know anabolics suppress them, but my LDLs were always very low, even though I ate McDonald's. I would eat McDonald's once a day, burgers and some fries once a day. Everything else was super clean, but my body was just metabolizing everything. And my LDLs were always like under 100, 89, and they were always shocked. So I have zero, coronary artery deposits. I've had cardiac CT scans. I have absolutely no deposits whatsoever. And my father had a quadruple bypass, but he smoked for, 40 years, and he didn't eat great. So I truly believe if your LDLs are in order or in line and they're low, your chances of having a blockage are probably low. If you have a family predisposition to blockages, okay, you're going to have a much higher predisposition. You really want to keep an eye on those LDLs. And the best way to, believe it or not, naturally lower LDLs would be a good soluble fiber supplement, believe it or not, really dramatically lowers LDLs, and essential fatty acids, like omega-3 fish oil, evening primrose oil, stuff like that. Yes. I make a product called Omegalize. I give them the Omegalize and fiber-like combination, and I see those LDLs go right down. So as a bodybuilder who's going to do cycles, you're going to have a very difficult time bringing HDLs up. Like you said, nothing really brings them up. Exercise a little bit, supposedly a glass of red wine or niacin, but they don't really see anything significant. But the trick is, if you can keep your LDLs at the normal level, you really don't have to worry about it.
Yeah. And the other thing that I also have noticed is making sure you don't overuse the anti-estrogens, because the anti-estrogens will bring down your HDL. So unless you absolutely need an anti-estrogen, don't use it just because you think you're doing it. You're doing yourself a favor. You're actually going to create more issues with having a low HDL and a higher cardiac risk issue.
So you've seen, I'm sure that, I know there's some gurus, I'm not going to mention names. I know guys that put people on like 5 milligrams a day of Arimidex, which is insane. That's 5 insane. Milligrams.
That's nuts.
That's crazy. I mean, you know who they are.
I do.
Yeah. Oh, you know who they are. Yeah. Very well.
What are their initials?
No, I'll tell you after, but I'm saying because that's just their protocol the last couple of weeks. I mean, that they do that. I mean, you need estrogen to sensitize your androgen receptors, and they don't work, and for sex drive purposes. So I don't know why people think that if you go from that, you need to have zero estrogen to be hard on stage. It's unnecessary,
No, at 5 milligrams of Arimidex, that's equivalent to, for those of you that are listening, that's equivalent to 5 doses a day. So that's 5 tablets a day. That's crazy. But yeah, I think a lot of now I'm curious. I'll ask you afterwards who does this, because I don't know what everybody else does, but you tend to know. But yeah, I think the biggest thing is going into the blood work. So the other things is getting your CT scan, getting your heart checked to see what your calcium score is, because the thing that's a very big thing for me is making sure that athletes get their everybody. I mean, even the executives I work with is getting your calcium score, because you're going to end up finding out how much possible blockage you have from your calcium score, because you're trying to chase a zero number. But as you get older, your deposits can start to calcify, and then it becomes an issue. So then what you want to do is you want to be able to be really cognizant of it. And then the other thing that Dave also mentioned was the fact that his LDL was very, very low, but you could eat perfectly clean and have high LDL if you're just genetically have problems. And you could take all of the fiber supplements in the world and you can eat totally clean. And if you just have a genetic predisposition to have high cholesterol, then you're basically at that point where you're going to have to possibly go on a statin. Now, it's one of those things you got to talk to your cardiologist about and your doctor, but that's something that if you are perfect on your diet and, Dave used to eat McDonald's and not have high LDL. And then there's other people who will eat, really, really clean, having, salmon that's Atlantic salmon, and they're doing all the perfect oils, and they're olive oil and they're still high. And it's just because it's just their way that their body processes it.
Yeah, genetics too. So
100%.
you're at the end of the day, you're unfortunately a victim to your genetics. And so I think, and I believe this we could do a whole show on this. I believe the DNA testing is going to be the wave of the future as to how you design your diet, your supplement stacks, because I've had a full panel. I have actually, if you go to my DavePalumbo.com website, I sell a DNA kit that's for a company that I kind of work with a little bit. And you swab your cheek, you send it away, and they'll give you a full readout of like 1 million genes and what they mean in terms of metabolism and, detoxification and what you're good at, what you're not good at. And I think that's the right way to start, a whole bodybuilding program, because now you have your genes here. Okay, I can't digest lactose. I don't handle caffeine well. I'm a terrible fat metabolizer, but I can handle carbohydrates. And now you know how to design your diet, because we always say everyone's a little different. You can't put one diet to everyone. There's a reason, because people have genetic defects in certain areas of certain, metabolizing certain kind of macronutrients and micronutrients. And you can now find that all out very easily with DNA testing. And I think that more people are going to be doing that in the future than ever before, because we have it easily accessible to us. And, getting back to what you said about the cardiac CT scans, prior to a couple, 5-6 years ago, if you wanted to see if you had blockages in your coronary arteries, you had to get an angiogram. That means you had to go into the hospital. They had to run a thing up your, through your groin, up into your heart, and actually look at the vessels with a camera. Now they put you in a machine for 10 minutes and they could determine your calcium score, which is really quick. If you want to do the cardiac CT angiogram, they will inject some dye into you, or they'll put like a little IV in your arm and some dye, and they can actually see if you have any blockages, not just calcium, but any blockages in your coronary arteries.
The soft blockages.
Yeah. And that's important, because I know I told Mel to go for that test, Mel Chansey, and he wound up having a blockage. He had to get a stent put in there. I mean, so if he hadn't gone for the test, he would have never known. And he had his dad passed because of a heart attack. So you could save your life doing these things. I mean, you're crazy if you don't check. It's such a simple diagnostic test that you can do. Had Dallas gone for one of those, he would have known he had a 90% blockage in that artery, Now, granted, he's young, but he was having heart issues. So he could have just gone, got the test. All right, you know what? I'm clear. Fine. No, I'm not clear. Let's address it now,
Right. Well, being 345 pounds probably didn't help him either.
No, but you're 345 pounds and you have only 10% blood flow to that, that one part of your heart, that's a recipe for disaster,
Yeah. And unfortunately it is. I mean, it's sad, because he had such I miss him so much. I don't talk about him much because it's really hurts me, because the kid had all the potential in the world, I really, really enjoyed training him. It was a good time. But he died so early, and he could have been the next Jay, Yeah,
he could have. And you know what? The weird thing is that he had symptoms of it in Australia. Something happened. I don't know.
That's what I heard. Yeah.
He was having problems. And you know what? All he had to do was go get checked out. And you know what? If his death, his death should not go without sending a serious message to the bodybuilders out there that you have to get checked, because you just don't know. We see it all the time, Hany. Basketball players in the prime of their career, 22 years old, guys in college, dropping on a court with an arrhythmia they didn't even know they had, and they had a heart attack and died. And, it can happen to anyone. We don't know. I have an arrhythmia. I found I have arrhythmia. I don't know if it was affecting me when I was younger. It might have been, but I have an arrhythmia, and I actually have a defibrillator in my eye that I had implanted, because I have kids now. I don't want to drop dead of now it only kind of affects me, and I don't even know what happens when I exercise at a very high level, which I don't do anymore. But, what if I'm running around, with my kids, playing soccer or something like that, and my heart decides it's going to go into ventricular tachycardia, and I have a heart attack and drop dead in front of my kids? It's not going to happen. Right. So I did that for protection, because I'm a father now. But I could have just said, I don't want anything in there. I don't want to do it. I feel fine. I never have any symptoms. That's naive. That's sticking your head in the sand. So at some point you have to take responsibility and say, you know what, we all have, and is it caused by being a bodybuilder? I don't know. I don't think so. The doctors don't think so, but we all have problems. Everyone has health issues, whether you're a bodybuilder or not. And if you stick your head in the sand because you don't want to deal with it, when tragedy strikes, you have no one to blame but yourself, really, and unfortunately you'll be dead, and you'll be going to be your family and your wife and your kids and your parents, or who, if they're alive, those are the people who suffer, and
Absolutely.
A lot of this stuff is unnecessary. When I hear about suicides, in our industry, it gets me really sad, because I know these people just needed help. If they would have gone to someone and seek help, maybe they would have been able to avoid having to, do that type of thing. And, that's why I think it's important for podcasts like yours and mine, where people respect our voices and, the experience we have. If we can help one person here, one person there, then you know what? Then we're doing a great job, because we've seen it all, essentially.
No, and I really think that that's the case, because what happens is you have so many of these, fly-by-night gurus. And that's why I hate the whole word guru. I like, I'm a coach. I'm not a guru, but if you want to call me that, you can. But we're trying to basically level out the highs and lows and try to make sure that people take care of themselves and make sure that they are pointing in the right direction in terms of information, but they're also not going off the reservation, because again, it's so easy to go down that road with the wrong person. And then you just go down that road of, that's just filled full of just really, pitfalls and just broken dreams, because you need somebody to kind of balance you out, kind of like the situation with Bostin Lloyd. I think, if he had somebody there that he really trusted that said, hey, look, man, pump the brakes. Don't use this shit. What are you doing? Stop.
He wouldn't listen anyway. He wouldn't listen.
You don't think if he had a mentor early on?
I tell him all the time. I'm always giving him advice.
Well, you did work with him. Yeah, you've been working with him for a while. You did. I don't
call me up and ask my opinion, but he likes to test things out. I don't know. He's very
And even though you tell him no, he still just does it.
Yes, he'll do it, because he's like, it's like telling your kid you can't don't climb on the couch. As soon as you tell them don't climb on the couch and you walk out of the room, they're going to climb on the couch. It's inevitable. That's just the way it goes. And the thing that worries me is there's a lot of new coaches out there. I run a course, The Secrets of Becoming a Diet Guru, do it about every quarter. And I train people on how to write diets, and I educate people on supplements and diet and responsible use of anabolic steroid cycles and stuff like that. And, a lot of coaches take this and they really get a great, benefit from it. But I see a lot of coaches out there, and Hany, and you could probably, attest to this, that do very risky things with their clients.
Yes. From
diuretic usage to high dosage of anabolics and GH and crazy insulin protocols and stuff like that. And that you and I know it's not necessary to do these things, and doing these things are not going to make the person better. But these coaches like to do it because the sensationalistic aspect of what they're doing and telling their clients to do makes these people think that they got some kind of secret knowledge, and that they might know more than Hany and Dave, though, because look, their dosages are higher and it sounds sexy and rock and roll. But the bottom line is that it's very dangerous. And that's, I've seen people killed with high doses of aldactone, and I'm not going to mention names, but we saw, a couple competitors, at least one pro competitor die within the last 2 years because they were taking ridiculously high amounts of aldactone.
How much were they taking?
Like 250 milligrams.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
I mean, that's insane.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Why would anyone do that? I mean, you got to be a freaking nutcase to prescribe that. So
250
these things worry
milligrams.
me. Yes,
yeah.
because these coaches and these guys don't know the ramifications of what they're telling people to do, because they don't know the science of what they're telling.
Do you think they're just experimenting? They're just kind of using them as kind of human guinea pigs?
Yeah. I think that's exactly what they do. The old Dan Duchesne method, trial and error with someone else's help.
That is scary. And I think a lot of people need to listen to that, who's listening to this right now, that, hey, don't be a guinea pig to this, because at the end of the day, I think it's your body. That's what you're going to have. Sensationalism, sensationalism. I mean, that people literally use these crazy things, and they'll use, how many times I've ever heard to go, hey man, I would be in Kuwait or I would be in Dubai, and they would say, hey, this is what I heard Jay did, what you did with Jay in 2009 or this or that. I go,
Dorian was doing this.
Yeah.
That was the old thing when we were coming up. Dorian did this.
Yeah, Dorian did this, and that's how Dorian grew. And you talk to Dorian, and he'd be like, what is that? What does that mean?
Dorian didn't even know what IGF-1 was. And I heard Dorian was slamming IGF-1 back in the day. That's how he got.
That's right. That's right. And I've talked to Dorian many, many times, and it's one of those things. He's in the same, he's in the same wheelhouse as us. It's just more is not always better, because, he's actually saw a decline in what he looked like when he went too high with things, and it's just one of those things where you have to balance it out. Going into the rest of the health things. Again, I talked about inflammation markers because I like, certain ingredients that help. You're talking about some of your products, but when it comes to the other types of blood work, is there anything else that you guys go over? Because I do think that after this podcast, I do think it'd be wise for people to go out there and say, hey, maybe I should have this thyroid checked, do a quick scan like you would a colonoscopy, go and get, just like you're getting your heart checked. Because, when you go out there and you do your EKG, your cardio, you're doing a cardio stress test, any of those things, when they turn around and they're seeing that there could be issues, they put you on, a treadmill and they put a cardio stress test on you. Well, this is one of those things that I do think that people should, because it's starting to pop up a little bit more and more, and I don't know why people aren't talking about it more. So I do think it's something that should be done, because it is quick, it's effective, it's non-invasive, it's nothing crazy. It's not like you got to go in there and do check your bone marrow or
What, Hany? These athletes are in such good shape that a lot of times they could pass a cardiac stress test, and they could have a blockage in their artery, and they would get through it because their bodies have compensated so much and their hearts have compensated that they can get through it. The cardiac CT scan is the way to go, or CT angiogram. That you're a nutcase if you don't go do one of those every 5 years, because you know what? Then you know if you have a blockage in your heart. It's so cut and dry. With the stress test, if you happen to be in terrific condition, you might actually this is true. My dad at 76 years old passes a cardiac stress test because he was having some sticking pains in his chest. A week later, he had a heart attack. Okay, and he needed a triple bypass or quadruple bypass. So, and my dad was 76 and he didn't do any exercise and he passed the stress test. So if they didn't have them back then, if he would have gotten an angiogram or something like that, or they would have done something like that, he would have known, oh my God, he's got 3, 4 blockages. Let's go in there and either stent them or, at this point.
I just think a lot of people don't want to know. I think just even getting blood work for most of those people, they don't want to even just do basic blood work.
Right. Because then they know, whoa, I have to stop doing stuff. I see a lot of high creatinines, Hany. I have I probably have read thousands and thousands of blood work. I don't know, because people send them to me. And I even tell people, I actually offer a list of blood work people should get done. I said, if you want, send it to me. I'll take a look at it. Obviously, if I need to go over it with you, I'm going to have to charge a consult fee, but I'll look it over for free. And if everything's good, don't worry about it. But I see so many high creatinines that it really scares me. And luckily, I can't. I'm not talking about 6s like Bostin. I'm talking like 1.7s, 1.8s,
stuff that's high,
stuff that you can fix.
Right.
But that's higher than I really feel comfortable seeing. And I immediately get these guys on detox programs and lower their protein down. And we give them, I have a product I sell called Kidney Stuff. And, we get them on everything possible to reduce that inflammation around those kidney, tubule or filtering apparatus, so that the body can start, cleansing and getting those toxins out. And the kidneys will regenerate, not as fast as the liver. Usually it will take a little longer, 5 to 6 months, but they will recover if you catch them. Once you're, very high on the creatinine scale, a lot of times this fibrosis and there's permanent damage to the kidney filtering mechanism, and you're not going to be able to fix that. But just get your blood work, like Hany said. This it's just, at least you know.
You got to get your blood work done.
You don't have to do anything about it, but at least you know what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, even if you're going to go in and just do the basics, do something. I mean, if you really want to be comprehensive, do everything we talked about. Go in there, get your CBC, get your lipid panel, get your hormones done, get your total, get your free test. Even go in there, you can go check your prolactin levels. You can look at all of the different hormones so you can see. all of those things, DHEA, obviously I always have my athletes do their vitamin D levels as well, because a lot of them are very, very low. And so all of those things, especially now with COVID, making sure that that's high, the vitamin D is super important. And also what I also recommend is a probiotic, is making sure the probiotic, because your gut health helps run your immune system. And so making sure, because we're getting hammered with constant antibiotics and pollutants every day, and nobody's eating 100% organic. It's impossible. So you're going to get into the food supply. You're getting these antibiotics, these animals have consumed, and then we consume them. And then what's going to end up happening is it's going to kill your good bacteria. And that's why I'm a very big advocate of adding a probiotic in, as well as I don't eat enough greens. So I came out with a greens product, and just like you came out with your stuff. Yeah. Evo Greens. And there's actually a probiotic in there as well. But the point is that we make products that we take, right? Because that's why we came up with them. Yeah, exactly. Because we take them and we're like, hey, instead of
not necessarily profitable, but they definitely are necessary.
That is very true. That is very true. There's a lot of stuff on there that's borderline. Probably accountants look at us going, what the hell did you make that?
Yeah, why'd you do that, right?
Exactly. But at the end of the day, when it comes to supplements and when it comes to blood work and when it comes to all of these things, you want to do these things. And it was good that you were able to find this off of another test you were doing for your heart, and you were able to find the thyroid issue. And the other thing is about your ketosis, and are you still pretty big? Because I know that you were always a big advocate on a ketogenic diet. Do you still advocate the ketogenic diets for your athletes?
Yeah, with most men, I don't really start them out on a ketogenic diet unless they're like fat and, really need to lose a lot of weight, because then it works pretty effectively because it's faster. But usually with guys, I start them off on some days on protein and fat with no carbs. And then some days they're eating carbs and, vegetables and protein. And then I alternate it around. What I find is when people hit a certain point, where you have to lower their carbs so much, they do better if you switch them into ketosis, because now the brain is using fat as a fuel source and their blood sugar levels are stable. They don't get mood swings and they feel better. Right. And so not everyone ever goes to a complete ketogenic diet, but some people do eventually. The women,
you used to do that though. You used to do that a lot with even your competitors back in the
day.
Oh
no. Yeah. I did. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't do it quite as much with some of the guys with the faster metabolisms now, so I find they just don't need it. But I liked it because it kept people, like I said, it kept their brain, functioning well. It took away cravings. People feel good. I have people that request it. They're like, Dave, I don't even want to do some carb days. Can I just do pure ketogenic diet? I said, yeah, that's fine. And my ketogenic diet is high protein, moderate fat. It's not like a high fat. It's not that medical ketogenic diet, which is not going to work for athletes, obviously. And with women, I always put them on ketogenic diets unless they have a ridiculously fast metabolism, which is 1 in 100 people. But the women do well on it because they don't hold any water, because when you don't eat carbs, you lose a lot of fluid. Women love being non-bloated. They like the fact that their brain is not craving carbs and sugars, because women tend to be sweet cravers more than men, I think. And they do really well on ketogenic diets, I find. And some days I don't even do fats with them. I'll go like protein and vegetables, because women what the problem is? These women weigh 120, 130 pounds, and they want to eat like a 250-pound bodybuilder eats. They want 6 meals. They want 6 ounces of protein. I'm like, you weigh 125 pounds. They said, you don't need that much food. So for them, if they're going to eat smaller quantities of food, fats tend to be a denser calorie source. So they feel more satiated on that. And they don't have cravings because their brain is in ketosis. So I find that, because look, let's face it. Why do people fail on their diets? Because they cheat, because they're hungry, irritable, So I find that if you can keep people from not being hungry and not having blood sugar swings, they're much more likely to succeed on their diet. And so that's why I use those. And I can assess the person I work with, what kind of mentality they have. If they're like a robot machine, I can give them anything to eat, and they're going to follow it, to the T. Then I can eat a morsel more. But if I give, I know the women I give, if I'm going to give them peanut butter, they're going to eat the whole jar. So I almost,
you have to understand.
You have to assess who you're working with. But I do like the ketogenic diet. I don't use it on everyone, however.
Okay. Yeah. Because I remember we had a discussion about that about 10, 15 years ago. And it was kind of a blanket thing you used to do back in the day. But now it seems like you've definitely adjusted to that. Which,
because everyone's metabolism's a little different too. And, I evolved. I wanted to, I think, prove a point how effective it was. And it did work. It does work on everyone. It does, definitely works on everyone.
Right. Do you remember our conversation about that though? Do you remember what it was?
Yeah, I think we had a debate on whether, on ketogenic diets and something. I don't remember exactly the whole thing about it.
Well, this was here. So we'll kind of go back a little bit. The key was not whether or not the fat loss was there. It was the muscle flatness that I didn't like. Because that was the problem I had, that you would lose a little bit of that three-dimensionality, because what would happen is it was really good to help with cravings and all of those things. But on the competitive side, you want to get to a person to a point where they're at least doing a carb cycle, because if you want a carb cycle, because you want to not be able to get so flat, because you won't be able to fill back up again, because 3 days of carbing up or 5 days of carbing up. So that was my whole thing about, it's great to get you striated glutes, but to try to stay full, it was something like that. And I think that was the whole thing about making sure that there's carbs that come in.
What I found was that, once I get people, I like to get people in shape early. I know you do too. Once I'm in early, I can start feeding them more. And then I add carbs back in, not necessarily 3 days before, maybe 2 weeks before sometimes. Yeah. Likewise, a lot of times I'll give people burgers and fries and stuff like that now to fill them out as well. Yeah. But I don't find I have a problem carving people up, because I think that when you do a ketogenic diet, you actually become more insulin sensitive. I think because your body's looking for glucose and insulin, which it's not getting because you're not feeding the person carbs. And so the insulin receptor density increases. So as long as you give people enough time, I think a lot of times also people don't realize that, clenbuterol and drugs like that burn fat make it very hard to carb up, because clenbuterol increases, glucagon, which does the opposite, mobilizes stuff out of the cells. So if you're taking something that mobilizes stuff out of the cells and you're trying to push stuff into the cells, obviously you're not going to be able to carb them up. So, I mean, I don't know if you do. I cut back clenbuterol and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think it acts more of a diuretic, because I think you get more of the diuresis effect of it. And that's one of the reasons why it's not the biochemical pathway of the carb up. It's actually the flatness that it carries, because the same reason why you get clen cramps is the same reason why you don't get, you get a little bit flat. It's because you're cutting your sodium, and then you're taking something that's also kind of creating a diuretic effect. So I think that's more of the reason why you get flat by, you have to be able to onset that a little bit.
I don't know if clenbuterol actually is a sodium issue as much as it is the electrolytes being able to cross the membranes. Because if you give diet tonic water, which is quinine to people with clenbuterol, it kind of cures the cramps, because it opens up ionophores, letting the electrolytes kind of equilibrate themselves better. I think it changes that. I think clenbuterol will push sodium.
It's definitely electrolyte driven, because
it's not necessarily that you don't have enough of them. I think it's just the electrolytes are not where they're supposed to be.
Yeah, it's definitely an imbalance. Yeah.
Whereas where a ketogenic diet might, if you don't take in enough sodium, you could dehydrate yourself because of a lack of sodium, because you're not holding water. So the mechanisms might be a little different. That's why, with clenbuterol, you can take in sodium, potassium, and it doesn't seem to help the cramps. Whereas you take an ionophore like a tonic water or something like that, and that tends to fix the problem a little better. Just like with with COVID now, the thing is we know that zinc inhibits COVID from replicating, chelated zinc, but zinc can't get into the cells very effectively. So if you take an ionophore, which opens up a hole for the zinc to go in, like a tonic water, or that what's it called, the drug, the prescription drug that Trump took,
hydroxychloroquine.
Yeah, hydroxychloroquine, which does the same thing. You can get that zinc into the cell, and now all of a sudden, the virus stops replicating. So slightly different mechanism, but yeah, I agree with you. So electrolytes are very important, especially hydration. If you're gonna, for training in the gym, you want to keep those muscles hydrated, because that keeps them anabolic. We know that the hydrated muscles lose functionality, and that they obviously, will lose fullness as well, which we don't want.
Yeah. And I think when people over diet, they go, hey, I didn't fill up enough. And you go, yeah, man, if you've over dieted, or you just haven't, and you've gotten flat for so long, you're just not as big as you were. And it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Right. That's the other thing you got to assess too. People forget
that, they don't have as much muscles they thought they had, right?
Exactly. So when they turn around and they go, hey, look, I just needed an extra couple of days. You could have eaten for another week. It wouldn't have mattered. You're just not as big as you thought you were. And that's what happens too sometimes with some of these guys, especially the amateurs, when they turn around and they go, hey, I really want to be full and I want to be big. Yeah, well, you felt great because you drank a gallon of water in the gym 6 weeks out, and you had sushi the night before. So between the sodium in the water, you had this crazy pump going on. But all in all, I really appreciate you coming on and
Thank you.
And coming on. Please, check back in. We want to follow this journey. We're going to go ahead and, like I said, we're going to put your link to your site up so that they can follow your journey both on your page as well. And we can, put together maybe a couple of Q&As for us together.
We should do a couple more, maybe come back on the RX Muscle Show and we can answer some questions. Cause I think this is good conversation because people can listen to this while they're working out and they could actually get ideas and they could write notes to themselves. Hey, you know what? Let me check this. Let me test this. Because look, we've seen it all. You've seen a million athletes you've worked with. I've worked with a million athletes. I've worked on myself and you've done yourself, and experience counts for something. Plus we both have actually a degree in college, so we actually have a science background to kind of fall back on so that we're not just talking gibberish here and bro science. So people should take what we're talking about, I think, and take it seriously and apply it to themselves, because we're not just, wasting time here. This is valuable information that I wish I had when I was coming up in the sport, and I just didn't. There was nothing like this available.
No, and that's where you could spend all that time that everyone's spending on social media following their favorite shoe company or this or that. Spend a few minutes, listen to some of these podcasts, because I think it would really behoove you, because this is free information. This is information you can take and be able to apply for your own health. And who knows, like you said, it could stop a heart attack or it could cancer, pre-screening for your colon cancer, thyroid cancer. And again, you being open about this is really, really big, because it's going to allow people to create awareness. So thanks again, Dave. Everybody out there, just remember, please make sure you subscribe, comment below. Let us know what you'd like for us to do next on the YouTube. And if you're listening to this on iTunes, then go ahead and don't forget to rate the iTunes episode. And again, thank you so much, man. This was a great time, and we wish you all the best. And hopefully this is something that's really, really super either benign or curable. We'll be praying for you. And thank you again, Dave Palumbo, Hany Rambod, and that's the truth.